Hello, sixth graders. Today we're going to be doing a lesson over classifying rational numbers. Make sure that you have this slide pulled up, you're ready to click the pencil, and that you're ready to go. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to classify rational numbers, integers, and whole numbers. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to classify rational numbers, integers, and whole numbers. So what will you be able to do? I hope everyone said that. Great. Next slide. Okay, before we get started on rational numbers and integers, let's review whole numbers. We talked about whole numbers and we said that whole numbers are numbers that are not fractions, they don't have decimals, and there's no negatives. So it starts with the number 0 right here and it goes all the way to infinity. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are all whole numbers. I want you to go ahead and write 3 whole numbers here below on the blanks that are not listed on the number line. So write 3 numbers that are whole numbers that are not listed here. Pause the video to give you a second to write these 3 numbers. Okay, I chose the 3 whole numbers. I chose 45, 57, and 13. All 3 of these are numbers that are not fractions, not decimals, and not negatives. Okay, so now let's review integers. Integers are numbers that are not fractions, not decimals. If it helps you, you can remember that integer starts with the letter I, so it's the numbers that I can see on the number line. So all of these numbers, -7, -3, 2, 0, +7, they're all integers. These are all integers. Remember, integers are not fractions, not decimals. Over here, I've asked you to circle the numbers that are listed below that are integers. So please pause the video and give yourself a second. Circle all the numbers that you see that are integers. Okay, so I hope that you circled the correct numbers. I'm going to go ahead and circle the numbers that are integers up here. I see the number 0. 0 is not a fraction, not a decimal. We have the number 12, and we have the number 124, and the number -45. I hope that you all circled all 3 of these numbers. Now what we're going, I'm sorry, not all 3, all 4 of these numbers. Now what we're going to do is over here, it says that some integers are also whole numbers. Write the numbers that are integers and whole numbers. So from over here, we have 12, -45, 0, and 124. I want you to write the numbers that are integers and whole numbers over here in these blanks. Go ahead and do so. Pause the video to give yourself an extra time. Okay, I'm going to write the whole numbers that are the integers that are also whole numbers. The first one I see is 12. 12 has no decimals, no fractions, and it's also a positive number. It's not negative, so it's a whole number. 0 is our next one. It's also a whole number, and our last one is 124. These 3 numbers are integers and whole numbers. Let's go to the next slide and talk about rational numbers now. Okay, a rational number. A rational number are numbers that are fractions, decimals, and negatives. So they're all 3. The definition of a rational number is that it's a number that can be written as a fraction, which we call a over b. If you see a over b, that just means written as a fraction, where the bottom number cannot be 0. So b right here on the bottom cannot be 0. So we're going to go ahead and put these numbers over here on the right in the correct spots over here. Some of these numbers are only rational numbers. Some of these numbers are integers and rational numbers. Some of these numbers are whole numbers and integers and rational numbers. We can do them together. So I have the first number. It's 12. 12 is not a fraction. It's not a decimal, and it's not negative. So if you remember, that's a definition of a whole number. So I'm going to write 12 over here. 12 is a whole number. it's also an integer, and it's also a rational number. The next number is 8.5. 8.5 is a decimal number. So let's think. Can whole numbers be decimals? No. Can integers be decimals? No. So it's not a whole number, it's not an integer. 8.5 is only a rational number. So I'm going to write it over here under rational numbers. Let me cross these out after I'm done. Okay, 0. 0 is not a fraction, it's not a decimal, and it's not negative. So 0 would classify as a whole number. So it's a whole number, and it's an integer, and it's a rational number. If you've been following along, you might notice that if a number is an integer, it's automatically a rational number. Do you guys get that? Let me say it one more time. If a number is an integer, it is automatically a rational number. If a number is a whole number, it's automatically an integer, and it's automatically a rational number. That's why this big box covers all the rational numbers. The integer box and the whole number box are inside the rational number box. Integer box is this box right here. And if you notice, the whole number box is inside the integer box. Because if it's a whole number, it's also an integer and it's also a rational number. Okay? I want you to go ahead and do the next numbers. 2 1/3, 124, -45, 5/7, and -8 39/100. Go ahead and put these numbers in the correct boxes. If you need to, swipe back to the other slide so you remember the definitions of whole numbers and integers, okay? Pause this video so that you can have some time to write the numbers in the correct spots. Okay, let's see if we got the right numbers in the right places. I have 2 1/3. So 2 1/3 is a fraction. So automatically, we know that whole numbers cannot be fractions and integers cannot be fractions. So 2 1/3 would go in the rational number box. Let's cross that out. Now I have 124. 124 is not a fraction, it's not a decimal, and it's not negative. So it goes in the, great, it goes down here where whole numbers, integer numbers, and rational numbers. Let's cross that one out. Next number I have is -45. So -45, it's not a fraction, it's not a decimal, but it is a negative number. And I know that whole numbers cannot be negative numbers, but I know that integers can be negative numbers. So I'm going to put -45 here on the integer and rational numbers because it classifies as a rational number because it's a number, and it classifies as an integer because it's not a fraction, not a decimal, it's just negative. All right, next number, 5/7. So 5/7 is a fraction. I know that whole numbers cannot be fractions and integers cannot be fractions. So the only possible choice for me is going to be here in the rational numbers, 5/7. Let's cross that one out. My last number is -8 39/100. -8 39/100, it's negative and it's a decimal. I know that whole numbers can't be decimals and can't be negative. Integers, so it can't be a whole number. Integers can be negative, but they can't have any decimals. So my only option is rational number. So -8 39/100 would be a rational number. Okay, so now that we know what the difference is between a rational number, an integer, and a whole number, now let's talk a little bit more about that definition that I said in the beginning. I said that rational numbers are numbers that can be written as a fraction, which is a over b, where the bottom number cannot be 0. So we need to make sure that these are all actually rational numbers, and the way that we do that is write them as a fraction in the form a over b. So the form a over b stands for as a fraction. Okay, so let's start with the number 12. If I want to write the number 12, which is a whole number, as a fraction, how could I do so? Exactly. I'm just going to put a 1 on the bottom. So 12 as a fraction would be 12 over 1. I wrote 12 in the form a over b, and in the form a over b, 12 is 12 over 1. Our next number is -3. If I want to write -3 in the form a over b, which is just as a fraction, How, how could I do that? Well, let's think. How would we write positive 3 as a fraction? Exactly, we'd write 3 over 1. So now that it's negative, all I do is I put a negative sign in front of the 3. And now it's negative 3 over 1. If you want, you can also put your negative sign in front of the fraction. That is perfectly okay. Whether you put your negative sign right here in front of the fraction or right here in front of the 3, those are both correct answers. Since I like it better, I'm going to put my negative sign in front of the fraction. All right, our next number is 4 2/5. How do I change this mixed number into a fraction, an improper fraction? Right, we are going to go all around the world. So what's 5 times 4? What is 20 plus 2? So the 22 goes on top. And on the bottom, I put what number? 5, because there's a 5 in the denominator here. I put a 5 here. Awesome. So 4 2/5 in the form A over B is 22 over 5. Our final number is 2 45/100. So I know that yesterday we talked about how to change a decimal into a fraction. We learned that, let's say I had 0 in front. I had 45/100. Well, all I look at the number that is furthest to the right, and I say, okay, what place is it in? What place value is it? I know that this is the ones place, this is the tenths place, and this is the hundredths place. So I'm going to write hundreds underneath, just in case anyone forgot what that looks like. All right, that's the hundredths place. So what am I going to put on the bottom of my new fraction? I'm going to put 100 because it's in the hundredths place. And on top, I'm going to put a 45. Okay, so let's go back up here. Instead of having a 0 in the ones place, I have a 2. So if I know that this ending part is 45/100, all I need to do is, since I know it's 2 45/100, I'm going to say 2 45/100. I'm going to make it a mixed fraction first. And we know how to change mixed fractions into improper fractions. I'm going to go all around the world. Do we see that? 2 45/100. It's not in the form A over B yet. It's a mixed number. It's not a fraction yet. So what we have to do is we have to multiply this and then add here. So it's 100 times 2, 200. And 200 plus 45 equals 245. And what number goes on the bottom? Exactly, same number stays on the bottom. I had 100 on the bottom over here. So I'm going to put 100 on the bottom over here. So 2 45/100 in the form A over B would be 245 over 100. At this moment, I want you to take out a piece of paper, a pencil, and you're going to start working on the worksheet, the 2-1 classifying rational numbers. Make sure that you show your work on a separate sheet of paper. I want to see how you changed these rational numbers into the form A over B. You must show your work on each and every problem.